I guess the inflammatory topic is, how would you say this? I guess I've been thinking about nationalist women and why they make the best wives. And what I'm probably about to explain to you guys is why, essentially, in a way that will piss off every liberal feminist, every trad wife, LARPer on the internet, every passport bro, geez, everybody, all the expats. But this came to me because when you check the data on the marriage success rates, dude, for these kinds of families and how stable they are. And when you compare them to what traditional societies have known for thousands of years before, Western civilization decided to commit suicide through multiculturalism and feminism. So let's talk about it. Yeah, snow bunnies, we're going to talk about it. So when I say like nationalist women, I'm not talking about American conservative girls who vote Republican but still have body counts in like the double digits and think that going to church on Easter makes them traditional or some fucking shit like that. I'm talking about women from places like, let's use an example of the Balkans, Eastern Europe, Latin America, where the cultural Marxist rot hasn't fully metastasized yet. So these are women who understand the power structures, right? The male female dynamics, because and I would say not because they read it in a fucking book, but because they actually grew up in a society where, tradition isn't an aesthetic. It's actually for survival. It's a survival mechanism for them. And their framework for family and structure and all that shit, it comes from a place of understanding that these traditions benefit them. Not from some like performative bullshit, they pretend to be submissive so they can avoid a real fucking job. Okay? That's not what I'm talking about here. But that's what I'm saying when I'm trying to make clear to you the difference between a nationalist woman and a trad wife, right? Because a trad wife is a liberal woman that's LARPing as a conservative to lock down a high value man who will pay for her lifestyle while she's posting fucking baking bread on Instagram. And the second that guy loses all his income or he stops performing whatever way, she'll just divorce him and take half his shit because her conservatism was always transactional, okay? It was never about genuine belief in the traditional values or traditional family structures, just finding an easy fucking life that it was disguised as tradition, okay? So how does that compare to like nationalist women? Well, from what I've seen here being in the Balkans, these women have like an active contempt for these kinds of LARPers because they see right through this shit. So they understand that a woman who's truly committed to her people and her culture doesn't treat tradition like a fucking costume that she just puts on when it's convenient. And they ostracize these fake conservative women from their own communities because they know if they tolerate this shit, that tolerance for weakness and that fakery is how cultures die. Okay? So you can tell the difference immediately when you talk to them because the nationalist woman understands hierarchy. Okay, she understands that men and women have different roles that aren't equal, but they are complementary. She understands that her power, right? Power, that's an important word. It comes from supporting her man's mission, raising strong children, not competing with him, not trying to emasculate him, right? Or being fucking so demanding that he does shit like half of the fucking housework because feminism told her that's equality. Okay. And she sees having children not as some personal lifestyle choice, dude, but as a duty to her people, as her role in a demographic war that her civilization is currently losing because Western women were convinced that careers in consumerism could replace the purpose of continuing their bloodline. And it's starting to get spicy here, okay? Because I'm walking you through this. I'm trying to explain to you the difference between a trad wife, a conservative woman, and a nationalist woman. So, the trad wife will say the right things about family, tradition, but they'll push on anything. Or I should say, these women, if you were to push them on some of these conservative values, you'll find a lot of liberal values underneath. It's fake. So, for example, she wants a traditional man who leads and provides, but she wants also that he respects her independence and consider her opinions equally and split decisions 50-50, which isn't traditional at all, by the way. That's just feminism with, cottagecore aesthetic, essentially. This is what you would call a covert feminist. And that's what a lot of conservative women in the United States or the West in general are. It's mostly covert feminism. And the reason that nationalist women make better wives because their mental model is actually congruent with what makes marriages work, right? Long term, which is female deference to male leadership. You could say respect for masculine authority, that relationships aren't democracies, they're hierarchies, and then accepting that her role is to support and nurture while his role is to lead and protect. And this isn't oppression, dude. This is just nature. And this is how every successful civilization in history literally structured family units. Because the alternative is some feminist shit show that's currently destroying the West all around us. We can see this shit. So feminism's like greatest con job ever. Basically, it was perpetrated on women, no less. And the results speak for themselves. You got divorce rates at 50%. 50% of liberal women are on SSRIs, I believe. They're on pills, which is alarming to say the least, right? And this con job happened because women were told that they could have it all. And essentially, all of them have discovered too late that having it all means being miserable, alone, and childless at 40. And you got entire generations now of children growing up without fathers because the women were told they didn't need men and that the state would be their provider. And then you've got women on antidepressants at record levels, despite having more freedom. How the fuck is that working? Than any woman in human history, because it turns out liberation from traditional roles doesn't make you happy, dude. It just makes you a used up carousel rider, right? And you're wondering why no quality man wants to commit to you after you fucked half the city. We've been telling you this. And men essentially are checking out of marriage entirely because the deal's so bad for them that only a sucker would sign up. You get fucking divorced, you lose your kids, you'll lose your house, half of your income for the next 18 fucking years, and she gets to have sex with the personal trainer while you pay for it. And they call that equality. And according to feminists who spent 60 fucking years now, if not more, demanding liberation, right? And then they discovered that liberation means dying alone with cats because you priced yourself out of the sexual marketplace. Winning, isn't that called winning? Pin awards on women. Pin them all over yourself, right? And make them like cat food too, so your cat has something to eat beside your face. So this is why I say nationalist women are better, because they come from actually conservative cultures that don't have this problem because they were raised, or I should say they weren't raised to believe the feminist lie, right? That women are oppressed by traditional marriage, which is bullshit. So then they understand that a woman's peak power, it comes from being a wife and a mother, not from girl bossing in some corporate hellscape, essentially where she's competing with men anyways for what? A middle management position that makes her miserable? And that these women, they're convincing themselves somehow that that is the right path in life? How, dude? Do they not see their traditional mothers? Do they not see the roles that they embodied? Do they not see what their grandmothers had, right? And how their mothers and grandmothers did it before them, and they were happy. Unlike the Western women who see their feminist mothers today and think, I don't want to end up like a bitter divorced hag with cats. Do they not see this as they're coming up? Like, this is what's mind-blowing. Here's where it gets really dark, dude. And this is like, nobody wants to say this shit out loud. Okay, so I will. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Listen to me, because I've been thinking about this shit as I've been traveling. International or interracial relationships, marriages, have a massively higher failure rate than same race, same culture. The reason isn't just cultural, right? It isn't just language differences or barriers. It's that women who date outside their race or culture are by definition liberal in their worldview because traditional women don't do that. I'm telling you, hot fucking take alert, get ready. Get ready, dude. Listen to me. A woman who's truly traditional, truly nationalist, truly committed, real, right leaning, right, values her culture, her people. These women, they don't date outside their race. She doesn't marry foreigners. She doesn't pursue relationships that break with thousands of years of tradition in her lineage. And these kinds of socialist women view this as a form of treason. I'm not joking. So you have these women in these communities who essentially date outside their race, they get ostracized and cut off by these kinds of women because these nationalist women, they understand they're the gatekeepers of their people's future. And it's a hot fucking take, bro. These nationalist women, I'm not joking when I say this shit. Are you ready? These women, someone's going to get mad at this, dude, but I have to say it out loud. I've had enough conversations like this. They think race mixing, is how you lose your genetic line, your culture, your identity, and eventually the entire civilization you grew up in. So when you see a woman willing to cross those barriers, what you're actually seeing is a woman who's rejected tradition, who's bought into the globalist like multiculturalism, and is liberal by nature, even if she claims to be conservative. And truly nationalist women have contempt for these women because they understand soft times create weak men who failed to protect their women from this propaganda, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that failure. And this is why, here we go again, passport bros fail at such high rates despite all the fucking hype about foreign women being better than Western women. Listen to me here, okay? Because yes, I'm sure, and I agree, there's the women in the Philippines or Thailand or Brazil or whatever the be, they're more feminine. They are less openly hostile than American women. But if she's willing to marry a foreigner and leave her country and her people, she's already demonstrated that she's not traditional. She's opportunistic. And opportunistic women make terrible wives because their loyalty is to their own interest, not to you or your family or your lineage. Are you hearing me here? And nationalist women also have contempt for passport bros because they see them as weak men who are running from the fight to reclaim their own women, instead of standing and demanding that Western women be held accountable for embracing feminism, for example. So you're not getting respect from truly traditional women overseas. You're getting used by opportunistic women who essentially see you as a wallet. This is the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. Your highest chance of marital success will always be with your own people, your own race, your own culture, because shared genetics and shared heritage and values create a foundation that cannot be replicated through love or connection or romantic nonsense. None of that shit. That's what people tell themselves today when they're chasing all this foreign pussy. The numbers don't lie, by the way. Do you know that over 80% of expat marriages fail? This is what caused me to think about this. So when you marry someone from a completely different country and culture, you're looking at catastrophic odds. And nobody talks about this shit because the passport bro grift depends on selling desperate men the fantasy that foreign women are the answer. 80%. And look, I'm not saying that interracial relationships can never work. I'm not saying any of that shit. I'm just saying that the odds are stacked against you from the start, and pretending otherwise is fucking delusional, bro. The data shows higher divorce rates, higher rates of children with identity issues, higher rates of cultural conflict. And these aren't some small differences. These are massive statistical gaps that progressives, they try to hide this shit from you because acknowledging this would undermine the entire multicultural project that's essentially like designed to destroy homogenous nations and replace them with some rootless cosmopolitan consumers who have no loyalty to anything except their next dopamine hit. That's what you could say. But the reality is that people are tribal by nature. We are wired to prefer our own. And forcing diversity through mixing always creates tension and dysfunction that didn't exist before. So when you marry outside of your race, right, you're not just dealing with individual compatibility issues. You're dealing with genetic and cultural incompatibility that runs so deep, most people can't even articulate this. They just know that something feels off and that they can't figure out why their marriage is struggling. That's what I'm saying. A nationalist woman understands this on a genetic level because they're aware that preserving their bloodline matters, that their children carrying their people's genetic heritage forward matters, and mixing destroys the continuity. This is what nationalist means, and this is the part that gets people in a tizzy. And for the passport bros specifically, the thing that they don't tell you is that you're not getting traditional women when you go overseas. You're getting a woman who sees you as a ticket to a better life. So you're a fetish. You're like a resource. The relationship is fundamentally transactional from the beginning because she'll be really good at hiding it. And you won't find out until it's too late, right? So what the passport bros get essentially is really easy sex. That's true. And feminine behavior in the short term because you have money and status is relative, and especially to the local economy. But that's not a foundation for real marriage because the second economic incentive disappears, you're done. Or if she gets citizenship like in the West, and she will realize that she can do better. The facade drops immediately, and you're left with, a woman that's never actually loved you. She just loved what you could provide. And the 80% divorce rate proves it. And we have, by the way, plenty of stories of guys that say, what's the first thing they say? Never bring her back. Never bring her back. Never bring her back. Just make sure you never bring her back. Why do you think they say that, bro? They know on an instinctual level what that means. I'm being used. I'm okay with the transactional nature. If I keep her here in her poverty-stricken country, she won't leave. She can't leave. Come on, man. 80%, dude. 80% divorce rate. That's proof. For me, when I read that statistic, and it started off of a comment too. Some guy was like, when are you going to talk on some video I did like weeks ago? When are you going to talk about the catastrophic divorce rates of expats? And I was like, what are you talking about? Sure enough, you Google that shit. It's 50% or more failure rate than relationships in the United States already. That's fucking crazy. Most of these marriages don't survive once the woman gets what she wants, which was never you. It was just access to Western wealth and a citizenship. And the guys who succeed with the passport bro shit are the ones who understand this and just use it for what it is, dude. Fine. It's just easy access to attractive women without the pretense of building something permanent. It's honest, right? But the guys who go overseas, right, thinking that they're going to find their quote trad wife because, Western women are too fucking corrupted, those are the delusional ones. Because the women willing to marry a foreigner for economic opportunity, no less, you have to think about that, is definitionally not traditional. She's the opposite of traditional. She's just a whore with better marketing. That's gonna, someone in the comment section, my wife's not a whore. I'm in the Philippines. I'm in Thailand. My woman's different. Okay, dude, fine. You got your unicorn. Okay, your life's different. I'm not saying you can't succeed at this shit. We're just talking statistics. We're talking probabilities. So if you're gonna go overseas, anyways, after watching this video, the smartest play you have is to go where people look like you. Because at least you're not adding racial and cultural barriers on top of all the other fucking challenges of building a relationship. If you're white, go to Eastern Europe, right? You will share racial and cultural heritage. If you're Asian, go to Asia. If you're black, go to fucking Africa, bro. Trying to cross these racial lines while also crossing cultural lines is just compounding the difficulty for no reason except what? To be fetishized? Excuse the fuck out of me, but I'm not retooling my entire life to literally go overseas to date a woman from a completely different culture whose family will not accept me because either my skin color is different or I'm different from a whole different culture and I have to deal with that. I retooled my life to make it harder. No, dude, the whole point of retooling your life is to make shit easier. So, yeah, and that's the painful reality that we have. And even more painful truth, I would say, is that, and this is what Western men don't want to admit, and this is super brutal, dude. Even if you go to Eastern Europe as a white guy, for example, you're still at a disadvantage because these kinds of nationalist women, by definition, only want to date within their specific culture. So imagine like a Serbian woman, she only wants a Serbian man. It's not just that you're white. A Polish woman wants a Polish man. A Hungarian woman wants a Hungarian man. And you as like an American or a Brit or whatever Westerner you are, with your passport, whatever that you're carrying going over there, you're already down points because you're not one of her people. So you think you're solving a problem essentially by going overseas to find a traditional woman, but the truly traditional ones don't want you because you're not from their culture. You're not from their nation. You're an outsider. And the ones willing to overlook that and marry you anyways are by definition less nationalist, less traditional, more opportunistic than the women who won't give you the time of day. So you're still selecting from like a compromised pool, even when you think you're being smart about it. And here's another major strike against Western men, and nobody talks about this. That's religion, guys. Okay, it's absolutely central to these hardline, or I could say natural or nationalist women here, especially in the Balkans, okay, for their identity and their worldview. So If you're going to go to Eastern Europe or Latin America thinking that you're going to wife up a traditional woman while you're what, agnostic or a fucking an atheist, or you just culturally Christian, you're delusional. These women take their faith seriously. It's not some Sunday social club. It's the foundation of their value system and their understanding of family structure and gender roles. And most Western men, be honest, have completely lost their religion. So even if you find a woman who's willing to overlook that you're not from her culture, you are still facing the reality that she's deeply Orthodox or Catholic, and you haven't been to church in 10 fucking years except for weddings and funerals. And that's a fundamental incompatibility. That's going to destroy the marriage eventually, if not outright, because her faith informs everything about how she sees life, how she wants to raise children, how she views your role as the husband, how she understands submission to you as ordained by God, not just some lifestyle preference that she can abandon when it's convenient, like these fucking conservative LARPers, trad wives. They're in their little dresses cooking up a cookie. Bitch, please. You don't even get your hands dirty. You don't do any real work. So essentially, you're down multiple points now when you go overseas. If you're trying to find the truly traditional, you're not from her culture, you're not from her nation, you don't share her faith, and you're still wondering why the 80% divorce rate is so high, is because you're trying to build a marriage on nothing but your wallet and her desire to escape poverty. That's not a foundation, dude. That's a transaction that ends the moment the incentive shifts. And this creates the most painful irony for Western men, I think, which is so fucked to say, but our highest chance as Westerners for success is actually to be with women from our own culture, our own countries, our own communities. That's where the cultural and national alignment is the strongest. But feminism has so thoroughly rotted the fucking brains of Western women, and the leftist propaganda has so completely masculinized them and turned them into angry, unattractive hoardens, that the women who should be their best matches are now the fucking worst. American men should be marrying American women. British men should be able to marry British women. But feminism destroyed that possibility by poisoning an entire generation of women against men, against their own men, against traditional roles. Femininity itself got attacked. And nationalist women understand that this wasn't a fucking accident. This was a targeted weapon deployed against their specific civilization by forces that wanted to destroy the family unit and replace it with state dependency. So they know exactly who pushed this poison. Me and you know. And they actively resisted in their communities. And that's why they've survived while Western women are fucking collapsing all around us. So now Western men are faced with this impossible situation, dude, where the women they're most compatible with culturally have been ruined and ideologically destroyed. And the women who haven't been ruined, say ideologically, don't want them because they're not from the right culture. And that's the trap, essentially, that feminism created. It didn't just destroy Western women, it destroyed Western men's ability to find alternatives. But even that's a compromise, because the real answer is to find a woman from your own country, your own culture, your own community who hasn't been corrupted by feminism or liberalism. And I know, dude, that's hard in America, where every conservative woman, they're essentially liberal by global standards, but it's still a better bet in some sense than importing a foreign bride who's going to divorce you the second she gets her green card. And speaking of American conservatives being liberal, let's be honest here, where the Overton window shifted in this country, because American conservatives, at least in the part of the world I'm in right now, would be considered like radical leftists in places like Serbia, Hungary, Poland, shit like that. So when American women call themselves conservative because they voted Republican and go to church, they still operate within a framework that's so far left of actual tradition that it's almost meaningless. American conservative women still believe in equality. They still believe women should have careers. They still believe in divorce for unhappiness. They still believe in sexual liberation before marriage. They just draw the line slightly to the right where feminists draw theirs. But they're still feminists to their core. Their core assumptions about gender relations and all of that shit. Feminism won so completely that even women who reject it are operating within the framework of it. Compare that to a woman from the Balkans who grew up in a society where men are leading the families, right? The women defer to their husbands. Divorce is shameful. Premarital sex is scandalous, right? Traditional gender roles aren't even debated. They're just how things are. And you'll understand why I say nationalist women are actually conservative or from conservative cultures better than the so-called American conservative. They're just liberals, dude. An American conservative is like a liberal that wears a fucking cross necklace for the most part. And this matters for marriage because the mental models that these women carry about gender roles and family structure, that determines how they behave in a relationship, you guys. So an American conservative woman might say that she wants a traditional marriage, but her understanding of traditional is so corrupted by liberal assumptions that in practice, she's going to expect equality, expect her husband to do housework, expect her veto power over major decisions to mean something, expect to pursue her own career. And these expectations are fundamentally incompatible with actual traditional marriage where the man leads and the woman follows. So this is why I separate the conservative women and say, as nationalist women, coming from a actually conservative culture, they don't have these same expectations because she wasn't raised in a society that told her she's oppressed, or that if she defers to her husband, that's also depression, being oppressed. So their mental model for marriage includes genuine submission, genuine respect for masculinity, for authority, right? Genuine acceptance of gender roles. And this makes her a better partner because she's not constantly fighting against the structure, that she's working within it. You understand? So every feminist victory, I guess you could say, has made women measurably more miserable. Yes, you got the right to work, and now you have to work. You got sexual liberation, and now you're a used up single mother. Congratulations, right? You got no fault divorce. Now you're alone at 45, wondering where all the good men went. Literally, all the good men are in Thailand or the Philippines or Colombia, fucking 22-year-olds who haven't been poisoned by feminism yet. Because they would want you otherwise if you were a quality woman that had feminine qualities. But you don't, right? So they're out there because they want those kinds of women. It's insane, dude. Why just think of this for a second, ladies. For those that are watching this, I know this is triggering a lot of people. Why would a quality man commit to a Western woman who brings nothing to the table except student debt, bad attitude, a body count higher than his? And before you get triggered hearing me say that shit, screeching in the fucking comments, I don't care, first of all. These are just observable facts, and they're all backed by data that feminists, of all people, try to suppress because admitting this and all these statistics, it would crush their ideology. It's a complete failure. And it would mean they would have to admit that they wasted their youth on a lie. So instead, all these kinds of women will start to double down and blame men for not wanting to marry them after they spent their 20s riding the fucking carousel. And they're expecting some simp to wife them up at 35 when their eggs are all dried up and their pair bonding ability is destroyed. Traditional women don't have this problem because they get married young, they have children young, they build families with men from their own communities, and they're happier for it because they're fulfilling biological imperatives instead of fighting against it for some corporate fucking career that doesn't give a shit about them. This is the lie you were sold. So when I say nationalist women make better wives or the best wives, what I'm really saying is that women who haven't been poisoned by feminism and liberalism, not your dress up trad wife who dreams of giving up her job so she's a stay at home and mooching. I'm talking about women who still operate within these traditional frameworks, who understand and accept gender roles, who prioritize family over career, who see marriage as permanent, okay, who respect male authority. Those women create better outcomes for everyone involved. And the data backs this up, even though progressives try to hide it, because admitting it would undermine 60 fucking years of feminist propaganda, right? That's insane, dude. We're cooked, chat. Should I get through some of these or keep ranting? Yeah. Well, you're not cooked, dude. The problem is, it's true, you can't really find these women in America anymore. Or at least they're like extremely rare because, even women who grow up in conservative households are still swimming in like liberal culture from birth, right? Just like I said before. So they're exposed to feminism through the schools, through media, their friends, the time with their adults, their teachers. They've internalized enough liberal assumptions that they're conservatism is mostly aesthetic. And that's why guys are going overseas, because they've correctly identified that. Essentially, most American women are corrupted beyond repair. And I say most, I'm not saying all, but nobody wants to do the needle in a haystack either. The men who succeed long term are the ones who find women from their own background, their own culture, their own race, because that's where statistical odds are the highest. And anyone telling you otherwise is either selling you something or deluding themselves, because multiculturalism does not work in practice, no matter how much progressives screech about their fucking diversity is their strength. So the crux is there is hardly enough of these women left for all the men that are looking, okay? And it bears repeating, diversity isn't strength. Diversity is division. And every multicultural society in history either collapsed or required like brutal authoritarian control to prevent ethnic conflict. So when you import that into your marriage through interracial or international pairing, you're importing conflict that didn't need to exist. And your kids will pay the price by growing up confused about their identity, torn between cultures, belonging nowhere. Look, dude, I know this is brutal, and a lot of people won't want to hear it because multiculturalism and color blindness are like sacred cows in modern discourse. And I know my Passport Bro audience is probably super fucking pissed off right now because this shatters the hopeful narrative that going overseas is like the solution to Western women being corrupted. But lying to men about their chances of success in these interracial or international marriages, whatever you want to fucking call them, it doesn't help them. It just sets them up for failure and heartbreak. And look, I get it. Some of you are going to push back on this super fucking hard, of course, because you're personally affected. You're going to tell me about your cousin who married a fucking Filipina, or your uncle, who's been with his Thai wife for 15 years, all that shit. I'm not saying those guys don't exist. They're the 20% who made it work. But that means there's 80% who didn't. And when making one of the most important decisions of your life, you need to look at the odds, bro, not the exceptions here. The 80% divorce rate for expat marriages can't be swept under the rug just because it's uncomfortable or because acknowledging it means admitting, the Passport Bro solution that you've been banking on isn't some like magic bullet. It's just trading one set of problems for a different set of problems with worse statistical outcomes. Yeah. And it's fine. Some of you will question, a lot of what I've said, probably everything, right, that I've said here. That's why I said it was spicy. You're going to say I'm being like too harsh or too racial or too whatever. But, the uncomfortable truth is that race and culture matter more than people are willing to admit. And that women's political beliefs correlate with their relationship, their behavior in their relationship, I should say. And that traditional women don't date outside their race, that these nationalist type women, the most conservative of them all, these are the ones that make better wives than the liberals or trad wife LARPers. And it's regardless of what country they're from. And we have to admit that the American conservatives are so far left from actual conservatism, right, that most of them wouldn't recognize real tradition if it hit them in the fucking face, dude. These are the facts, and they counter the dominant narrative. But the dominant narrative has given us what? Collapsing birth rates, broken families, miserable women, checked out men, and a civilization in terminal decline. Okay, maybe then it's time to listen to what traditional societies have been saying all along, instead of pretending that this whole progressive social engineering can override millions of years of human evolution and thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about what actually works in the world. I don't know. I'd rather tell you an uncomfortable truth that might save you from like a catastrophic divorce than sell you some uncomfortable lie that will lead you into an 80% failure rate for marriage. Just because the truth is what? Controversial, or it pisses people off. At the end of the day, dude, your happiness, your family's future matters more than whether this message is popular or whether it conforms to, what people want to believe about diversity and multiculturalism. Just saying. I know I'm going to catch flack for this one, but I'd rather you boys go in there with the right intentions and a breadth of knowledge, and so that you don't get played, because these foreign women can be very cunning.